Hello and welcome to the vlog. As you can probably tell, I'm not on the canal. I've left my boat in a secure place, hopped on a bus and a train and walked a bit and come up to Liverpool to visit the boat that you can see in the background behind me. That boat is Perseverance, which belongs to my friends Joe and Michael. You surely know them already from their YouTube channel Minimal List. They'd moored in Salthouse Dock on the southern edge of Liverpool, adjacent to the Mersey estuary. The dock has plenty of 7-day visitor moorings for narrowboats and other craft. It was, as you can see, getting dark by the time I arrived, but I went for a very quick look around anyway. Salthouse Dock is next to and links through to Albert Dock, which was opened in 1846 and now houses shops and cafes around its edge. Canning Dock adjoins both and has some impressive buildings on the far side. That's the museum, as it says. That's Reba North, a centre for architecture. And the clock tower is on the Liver building, an icon of the city. In Canning Dock there's a boat promoting the museum. And, slightly further along, this historic tall ship, built in Sweden in 1938. It sank in the dock 4 years ago, but has since been under restoration. In the home of the Beatles, no surprise to find a boat with this name. Looking out over the Mersey estuary as the light faded was probably not the best idea to build confidence for the following day. Rugged seafarers will snort with derision at this level of swell, but narrowboats are built for flat, calm canals, and this might as well be a force 10 gale for us. It was blowing an absolute stink. With that comforting thought in mind, we retired for the night, ready for an early start. It is 6:30 in the morning, a time that mankind has never before seen, and we are preparing to have breakfast and for the arrival of the pilot. And we've been joined by another crew member. It's Lorna.
Morning.
Let me show you where we are and where we're going. This is the UK, and we were up here at Liverpool. We'd be heading out of the docks along the Eastham Channel towards the entrance to the Manchester Ship Canal.
It's quite a bit larger distance than you normally travel on a narrowboat on open water. It's a deep water port, so there's places where we'll be traveling over much deeper water than we normally would do, even on any of the major rivers. And there's commercial traffic that can be moving around. It's a sheltered river, an estuary, so it's not particularly windy or anything, but it's got enough shallows in places. It's, not the easiest thing to transit, so we actually have to have a pilot.
And here is that pilot, checking his charts and sorting everything out for our crossing. A lot of it, frankly, is down to admin.
There's conversations that have to be had with the Liverpool Ports Management. There's the waterway control at Eastham Docks. There's Eastham Docks itself. You need to get people out there to open it up. There's commercial traffic that be going through, so you have to arrive on schedule with that. And you have to get an extra seaworthiness certificate, which is like a boat safety inspection.
But what of the crew? Were they ready and braced for an exciting day?
I'm more nervous about this than I was at the Thames. Although in some ways it might be easier, because in hindsight the main issues with the Thames was the other traffic, and I'm kind of hoping there'll be less traffic here. But it's just the fact that it's a large open body of water, and on a canal or even on a normal river, you can pull over and you can get off. But, once we go down that lock, we're not getting off until we get to the other side. So it's kind of being out of control, really, and worrying about the chop and the wind and all the things that could go wrong that won't go wrong.
Almost ready to go. How are you feeling?
Great, fantastic.
Excited?
Yes. I will be when I wake up.
And we were off. Michael and our pilot at the helm, Lorna, Joe and me out of the way up front. George the dog was fascinated by all the sights, sounds and smells.
When you're filming, you'll get a little Not putting it on. No. I'll try not to scream this time.
From Salthouse Dock we went south through Wapping Dock, Queen's Dock, Coburg Dock and Brunswick Dock. Spirits were high despite the cold. I rather fancy having a go in either of those. At the end of Brunswick Dock there's a lock that takes us out onto the estuary.
Right, going in here, I'm not sure which side Michael's going to go alongside. There's a pontoon on either.
It is somewhat bigger than your typical canal lock and has a floating pontoon along the side which you tie up to. By this point, George had already had enough and was straining to get off. The huge gates closed behind us. Lock operations were controlled from that office up there. Lorna tied us onto the pontoon. And for no readily apparent reason, the traffic was stopped for this swing bridge. We are only a narrowboat and would have fitted underneath, but it must all be part of the process. And what's more, we were going down anyway. The front gates open to let the final swirl of water out. You can see we've descended maybe half a metre or so. And now, hearts dizzy with anticipation, or is it the wind, we headed out. What a relief, there was very little chop, despite a certain amount of swell. Occasionally the boat did seem to think it was a trampoline, though thankfully this was rare. Bye bye Liverpool. We'd all been moved to the back by the pilot for this bit, again for no readily apparent reason, and space was very tight. Michael took it all in his stride, and even George wasn't trying to escape, though he didn't look terribly pleased about the conditions. You'd think this was sunset, not sunrise. That's what 7:20 in early October looks like. It's rather pretty, actually. There are several of these navigation buoys along our route, keeping us on track.
They're saying, if you work for England, you had a house.
Is it me, or are these cranes dancing? Time for a status update. I don't entirely know where we are, but let's say for the sake of argument we're about halfway down the Mersey. It's absolutely flat calm and this journey is proving to be an absolute joy.
It's fine. I wouldn't say I'm relaxed, but it's quite pleasant now. We've got past the chop, the sun's rising and it's pleasant.
I still haven't woken up. It's really nice. It was really choppy at first. When we were coming out of the lock, it actually looked more choppy than when we did the Thames, but I didn't want to say anything because I don't want to scare Joe. But when we came out, it was fine. It was a bit cramped at the back, so I'm glad that we're out on the front again now. And it's really, really calm.
We were all vlogging, of course. Links to the others are in the video description. The way the filming worked was that George would keep an eye out over the side of the boat for anything interesting, and then let us know so we could film it. That's when he wasn't being molested by Lorna anyway. You know how on the canals a narrowboat has to find a winding hole in order to turn around? Imagine how difficult it is when you're steering one of these things up a canal. and in fact it's just come out of a lock so as to turn in the estuary. The lock is the one we're about to go into, onto the Manchester Ship Canal, and you can see this other massive tanker coming out of it too. You do get a certain sense of perspective with one of those behind you, I must say. For a distraction, we looked upwards. This floating thing, I don't know what it does, would be joining us in the lock. That's another tanker, but it gives you the scale of the boats around here. Perseverance cut its wake like a knife through lemon drizzle cake. That's the lock we'll use. This chap's waiting to receive a line we'll throw up to hold us tight against the side, out of the way of other ships who are joining us. First in alongside is that flat bargey thing with all the machinery on it. George was very keen to go aboard. And now the big one. That oil and chemicals tanker we saw coming out earlier had been winding, turning around to join us. It's pretty big, 96 metres long, 16 wide, and draws almost 6 metres. Just like us though, they get tied up with a long bit of string. For scale, here's a man up on the bow. And here he is again with us in shot too. I'm so glad they're holding on to that thing. The water swirled and swooshed, raising us up, the gates opening a tad to let the last bit come in. Then we floored it, needing to put some distance between us and that tanker, which could probably run us over without even noticing. It's like being on a speedboat. Quite the novelty for a narrowboater. Faster, Michael, faster! It's coming!
Well, we survived the Mersey and are now on the Manchester Ship Canal. I'm not quite sure how far along here we go, but we're looking for some sort of marina berth for the evening, I think.
Thanks, Lorna, professional as ever. At Ellesmere Port, not far from where we locked onto the Manchester Ship Canal, there's a dock which connects to the very top of the Shropshire Union Canal. We'd be stopping here for the night. In the next video, we carry on up the Ship Canal to Salford. Cheerio!